Welcome to the Deconstructed Woman podcast, a podcast about breaking down barriers between women, exploring and sharing perspectives of each individual woman's experience, and discovering what we have in common and what makes us different. Hosted by Elisa Marie and Jojy. So welcome back to the Deconstructed Woman podcast. Today, we're going to talk about non-traditional families. And as Jojy and I were getting ready for this episode, we were talking about what does that look like in the home and what does it mean to have a non-traditional family. So I'm going to speak a little bit about my own experience, but we're going to also talk about the different roles and how that may pan out in, again, this idea of a non-traditional family. So for me and my family, we had two working parents in the home up until 2 years ago, almost 3 now, when COVID hit. And so at that point, we made the decision for my husband to stay at home with the kids because he wasn't able, the place that he worked at had closed down. And at that point, it wasn't feasible for him to look for alternative work. And so he stayed home to save on childcare, and I continued to work. And that has been our roles for the last, like I said, 2.5, 3, almost 3 years now. And so, Jojy, what were you reading in the articles, and what did that kind of look like for other people in what we're considering non-traditional families?
Yeah, and before I jump into the article, I'll sort of talk a little bit about my family structure. So, I was raised in a 2-parent working family. That's really what I think is somewhat traditional. And so, and in previous, originally my current family, my husband retired probably about the same time that COVID, right before COVID hit. And so I go to work outside the home every day, and my husband is retired. And so that's sort of our current setup. It's different than what I imagined it would be 20 years ago when I was looking for a partner, but it actually has been very interesting to have of what I consider a traditional relationship where you've got 2 partners and both of them are working outside the home. And then now with my husband who's retired, and I leave for work every day and he does not. And so the article that Elisa was referencing earlier was this article titled Non-Traditional Family Roles Promote Gender Equality. And this is based on the research done by Assistant Professor Chesley at the University of Milwaukee. And basically what the article talks about is the fact that when you have a non-traditional family arrangement, there tends to be greater levels of equality in for the 2 partners in the family structure. And so what you see is that when she did the research, and I think she interviewed about 20 couples, that the gender roles were more equal in families that had non-traditional arrangements. And what she went on to say was that typically what ends up happening is that in a family arrangement where there are traditional gender roles, meaning that typically the father works outside the home, the mom might be a stay-at-home mom. And what she found in her research is that those families tend to have somewhat more solid roles within gender roles types, whereas in relationships where non-traditional, they seem to be a little bit more flexible and interactive. And so I guess with that kind of summary, Elisa, how do you react to that data? Does that fit with what you've experienced, or is it different than what you've experienced?
So I think that one thing that came to mind is that probably because my husband and I changed our roles just a few years ago, I wonder if we had started that way or if that had been the decision from the get-go versus kind of trying to adapt to that change in our family structure in the last couple of years. So I think that there is more equality in some ways, but I think that really the last couple of years has been an adjustment for us to find a way to make that more equal, to find a way so that we both feel like we're contributing. And I think that my husband taking on more of the home tasks, if you will, like doing more laundry, dishes, things that have to kind of make the house run. I think that has been an adaptation for him and not something that he naturally kind of jumped into and was like, oh, okay, it doesn't matter that I'm not working, this is what I'm going to do. And so I think that that may be a little bit of adjustment from somebody saying, you know, I'm not going to work, I'm going to stay home with the kids, either gender, and then what that looks like. You know, you've made a commitment, because again, this was put on us by the pandemic, and so it made sense at the time. I don't think that either of us anticipated that 3 years later we would still be in this type of position, but I do think that we have modified and adapted to it, and I do see more of, he is a chef by trade, so he does a lot of the cooking at home. And so I do kind of see that. And for our children, the example of, doesn't matter if you're a mom or dad, you have tasks in the home that you help with, and no one person has to do everything. So I think that we have a little bit of that, but I wonder if it would have been different if that was a decision that was made maybe, you know, earlier, or made not as the result of a pandemic.
So I have a question for you. This just popped into my head. So typically in traditional arrangements, I think that women have this sense that their work is overlooked or their contributions are undervalued. I'm curious, if given how men quantify their work and how they've been sort of trained to do that, do you find your husband quantifying the amount of work he does differently now than he might have done previously? Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm asking?
As far as what he does in the house, you mean like he's doing it in order to feel like he's contributing?
I think so, but also, almost like tracking how what he's doing, because he's probably giving voice to the tasks that he's done versus I think women, we just think, well, this is just everything that needs to get done. We don't necessarily call out, well, these are all the things I've done today. I just wonder if men would be different in that acknowledgement of what they have done because they typically do get acknowledged for their workload.
I definitely think that's part of it. I mean, I definitely hear kind of like, this is what I did for the day, but I think that's more because he knows that I'm the checkbox kind of person. So I'm like, okay, what has been done and what do I now need to do since I got home? But I think that what I do see from him a lot more is his strong desire to go back to work, to have an identity for himself, because it was so ingrained in his work that he previously did, that he doesn't want to stay home. And he's, we've talked about that. And each time we have that conversation, it's like, okay, well, let's look at how much childcare is going to cost. Let's look at how much you're going to potentially make. And does this make sense for you to go back into the workforce? Or should we wait until the kids are a little bit older? Because we have two that'll be in school this upcoming fall. And so it was like, okay, well, then there's only one child in childcare versus two. And so all the decisions are based upon what we have, what we're looking at. But I think that his identity is much more ingrained in working, contributing financially versus contributing in the home in a way that maybe would be seen as more of a traditional woman's role.
And I think that most couples do have to do that calculation. I remember doing that when my daughter was born. And unfortunately, I was in a position that was grossly underpaid in terms of being a social worker. And so when you look at daycare costs, and I only had one child, so looking at one child's daycare costs, I mean, it was almost as much as daycare would have cost. And so there was definitely this idea of, okay, but my identity is really tied to my work, and I don't know who I would be if I didn't go back to work. And I had just been on maternity leave, and I think I was going stir crazy. And so there was a lot of desire, and I can relate to your husband saying, I need to go back. I need to, be an earner. I need to contribute in a different way than I am, not taking anything away from what I'm doing right now, but I need to do more, whether it's individual pressure you put on yourself or social pressure or family pressure, any of that. I definitely think those conversations happen all the time, especially if there is a disparity in the income between the two partners and depending on the number of children you need to have in daycare. I mean, clearly that's just a mathematical calculation, right? And so it does make one partner's goals or desires, less, I don't know, equal of a vote when it comes to that mathematical calculation. So I definitely understand that. The tricky part of the research that Professor Chelsea found out was that when the female is the primary breadwinner and goes outside to work, her connection to the family unit is different than when a man is a breadwinner. And that's what I found to be so interesting, which I think in lots of ways explains sort of the conversations we've had about your role and feeling like your day never ends. Because what she found is that when a woman is the primary breadwinner, there isn't that separation between gender roles. And so when she comes home, she just picks up the pieces of mom, housekeeper, cook, all those chores that have to get done, versus when a man is the breadwinner, there's almost this acceptance that dad is home from work. He needs to relax. He needs to, I don't know, rest before he goes to work tomorrow. Whereas that same kind of phenomenon is not seen with women. So what do you think about that, Alyssa? I think you might have something to say about that.
I mean, absolutely. We've talked about in our past episodes about self-care, about why women put themselves last. I think that there's kind of this, again, we're talking from our experiences, but I think that there is maybe this trend. And again, that's the phase of life that I'm in. I'm sure it'll be much different when my children are teenagers or even older than that, where, I come home and they will have, hopefully, if we've done our job right, be helping with some of those tasks. So it doesn't all fall on me. But I think that I actually saw this meme the other day. I think it was just it must have been just, literally last night, where it said, it's not clean unless I clean it. And then I get mad because nobody else cleans. And I think that just rings very true for me. I showed my husband and I kind of chuckled about it because I genuinely feel like when I get home, like this is my job. My job is to keep our home. But yet I have gone outside the home and worked a full-time job. And so I think that some of that is because I still hold on to some of those traditional roles, even though I am the breadwinner. And I think that that's just I'm curious to hear if other people have that same distinctive kind of drive or, concept for themselves, or if I'm maybe an anomaly, which it's
Anomaly.
Anomaly. Thank you. So, I don't know if that's how other people feel. I just know for myself that I feel that drive to immediately kind of jump in and do the things that didn't get done that day. But I am saying, you know what? It didn't get done today. We'll try again tomorrow, because I really just don't have the capacity to do it all the time. But if somebody's coming to our house, or my mother-in-law is coming or something like that, I will immediately, if anybody's coming to the house, I feel like I have to jump in and make sure that the house is clean. I feel like that falls on me, again, even though my husband's home all day, so he should be able to kind of help, and he does. He'll pick up even more tasks during those specific times when people are coming over, but it still requires me to kind of do a quick search, or, looking over the house to make sure that things are the way that I want them to be.
And I've spoken before about the fact that my husband and I negotiated that I was going to give up some of the cooking responsibilities when he retired, because I just couldn't imagine working all day and then coming home to cook when he was at home all day. And he's done a great job with that. But it was interesting to me how much negotiation that took. And it wasn't just this like automatic, well, of course, I'm home all day, I'm going to cook. I mean, it wasn't like that was offered up. That was something that I felt like I just sort of had to say, hey, this is my expectation. And how are we going to make this work? Because I was very clear about the fact that I'm no longer going to continue that. And I think that might be, part of the dynamic is that women have to ask for what they need because you can't do it all. And I think that if given the opportunity, there might be, some lessening of that equality if I think the partner may not be asking for what they need. I think I learned a long time ago that I am not going to be Superwoman. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. And maybe it's just that, I don't keep great as a house as somebody else. I think there's, people, I think my time is money. And so I would rather either not clean the house or pay someone to clean my house or live in a house that's not completely picked up. I think I just know some of those things about me and I can live with that. I have known women who are like type A when it comes to their house and their children and their jobs. And, I think that you have to play to your strengths, whatever those are. I don't judge women who are different than me, and I hope they don't judge me for being, a little bit less type A about that kind of stuff. But it is just, my own survival instinct, because I've always been career driven and I've always had jobs that have taken up, 50 plus hours in my work life, because A, I'm a workaholic, but B, I also enjoy. That's probably the major identity I have. And even to this day, my first identity is probably as a career. And everything else comes after that. And it's taken me many years to be able to say that without feeling embarrassed or ashamed. And so now I wear that with a certain amount of pride that, yeah, this is who I am. And so if I'm going to give 50, 55 hours a week to my job, then other things need to fall into a respective order. So that's sort of the way that I look at it. But, there's not a one size fits all for people. And I think that everybody sort of needs to do the best they can with what they have at the moment they have it. So that's sort of, the way I feel about it. Any
Yeah.
reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a learning curve, and I think that I'm kind of getting to that point, although I don't know why it took me so long to realize that, when they say you can have, you know, a clean house, a happy family, or, work-life balance or work, but you can't have all of them. And so, I'm probably botching that phrasing, but you know what I mean. I think people have probably heard it before, that you have to kind of give and take from certain areas of your life. And I'm kind of learning now, like, okay, it's all right if the house is in disarray because I had fun with the kids, or because I worked a long day, and quite frankly, I'm just too tired. And so I think that there really is this balance of being able to say, I can do most things, but I can't do all things. And I think that that there are, kind of going back to the topic of non-traditional families, I think that there is more pressure on a woman who is working outside the home to be able to do all the things, keep the house and work the job, and kind of make it all fit together. But I think that that's probably not a realistic expectation. And so either both partners kind of work together to figure out, okay, this is what I can do and this is what you can do, and they work together to take the pressure off of both of them. Or, like you said, maybe hiring a cleaning person, or whatever the circumstances in your particular circumstance, what will work for you is what you can do. But I think that there's definitely there are gender differences, because I can say with all of my thoughts behind it, that if I could come home and just relax at the end of the day, I would be ecstatic. That would be an amazing thing, to just come home and sit down and play with the kids and all of that. But I don't always have that. Very rarely would I have that opportunity to do. And so I think that that's something that hopefully will come with time, or that my husband and I will work something out. But at this point, that's not what it looks like for me.
The other thing I also wanted to talk about, before we wrap up this episode, I can't believe how quickly these episodes go, is also to think about, some of the busiest people I know are stay at home moms who compensate in many ways by not working, by getting involved with lots of charities, volunteers, school activities, things like that. So by no means am I trying to discredit stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads who feel like they're not contributing. I mean, I am exhausted by looking at women who stay at home. I don't know that many dads who stay at home, so I can't speak to that. But I have known many, many women who have stayed at home while their spouses worked outside the home, and they are busier, I think, in certain ways than I was as a working mom, because I think they have this need to feel like they are doing as much work as somebody who's working outside the home. And I think that that's an internal, checklist that they're going through most of the time for the women that I've known. But I also think that they want to feel valued. And so by far, I think they accomplish a lot more in one day than I think I did as a working mom. But I think it's because they feel that need to continue pushing and working and volunteering and doing charity work and raising money and PTA and all this kind of stuff. So, no, definitely, kudos to the moms and dads who work at home and keep the house afloat and keep our communities and our schools running because those positions are important as well. Before we signed off, I did want to take a moment. Elisa, you and I have talked about our friends and our family and our listeners who have given us such great feedback. So I wanted to take a moment to thank all of our listeners who have reached out to us, via text message, email, voicemail. And we've just had some wonderful messages that have really kept us encouraged to continue learning this craft of podcasting. And I just wanted to, thank my friends, especially people like Sandy, who was the first person to leave, and the only person to leave us a message on Anchor on voicemail. I was so excited and thrilled that, she did that. And I could hear her voice when she said that. I really appreciate my friends, Margarita and Natalia, who have been supportive of giving us feedback and really encouraged us to come up with a voice for our listeners. And, we have, thanks to Elisa, started a Facebook community where now some of our listeners are jumping in, and we're trying to learn how to interact with our listeners and make it a process by which people give us feedback. And so just so many people and, my sister-in-law, Ronnie, and my friend Shiny, who have been sharing our reposting, and my Aunt Sophie, who have been reposting our episodes and our links and our, all these different things we're doing so that they can share them with their network. Those are my personal thank yous. Elisa, I'm sure you have a bunch of people too to thank as well. I guess this is our time.
Yeah, I mean, I would just ditto all of that because I think that it's probably too many people to name right now, but all of our supporters have just been amazing. And I think that between Jojy and I, we text message or email each other, hey, I heard this from so-and-so, or this was some feedback. And we just love that because we want this to be an interactive thing in which people send us ideas, we talk, and the Facebook group is getting up and running. And I love being in there and seeing what people are saying, and to also get some validation that some, people are experiencing the same things that we are. We love to have these conversations, but we would love you to be part of them as well. So I will try to link the Facebook group so that people have access to that who are maybe not in our immediate social circles. Maybe you're hearing us from afar, and hopefully we'll be able to touch base with you as well. We did create the Facebook group to be a safe space where people can come and comment and tell us your ideas and thoughts and not have to worry about it being kind of out in the open. So we do have things in place to ensure that we're monitoring who's in there and what's being discussed to really create and foster that safe space. So thank you to all of you. We look forward to hearing from you more. And I just wanted to end with saying that, yeah, absolutely, Jojy, kind of going back, I'm circling back for a moment because I think that people, regardless of your job, whether it's at home or in the work field, you have such an importance. And I think this is a conversation I have with my husband all the time about he is having such an impact on our children and being home with them. And it's something that sometimes I wish I could have, but financially we can't. But that alone is such a significant job that regardless of what role you have, you are having an impact on your family in that particular way. So we loved sitting down and talking about this, and we'll end here and kind of touch base with everyone soon.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, The Deconstructed Woman. If you liked this podcast, please share it with your friends, rate this episode, or subscribe to be notified of all new content. We want to hear from you, our listener. Do you have thoughts on the discussions we're having? Want to share topic suggestions, or want to join us for a topic that you're passionate about? Contact us at our email address, thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com.